informative information that you'll take away from this. Again, my name is Paul Harrison. Myself and the colleagues who are around your kind of Zoom call, all of us work at JPMorgan Chase. We'll be talking generally about our careers, how we got started, what we love about the industry, and hopefully you walk away with a good sense of either A, if this is a career that you'd love to explore, or if it's something you've been thinking about doing, the best path you can take to get involved and ultimately start off an exciting career in banking. I wanted to just give you a quick overview of, because I want this to be super productive, but also fun for you, a quick agenda of what we'll go over. So the first thing is I'm going to introduce the panel and the folks who are around the virtual room, talk to you a little bit about JPMorgan Chase itself. Secondly, we're going to kind of meet the panel, and I'm going to have a fireside chat, throw out a bunch of questions to them and let you tell you a little bit more about kind of what they do and who they are. We'll do some rapid fire questions I have for some of the folks who are around the room, and then kind of couch it with some Q&A if anyone has any general questions out there. And then lastly, we will give you some resources on how to explore potential internships and what that whole process looks like if you're interested in Chase and JPMorgan Chase. So first off, let me tell you a little bit about Chase. So when I first personally got started in banking, which is about 10 years ago at this point, my thought of Chase was, hey, that's the bank where, especially if you live in New York City, there are branches on every block, right? And so when I thought of someone having a career at a bank, my brain immediately thought, oh, you're a teller, or you work at a branch, or maybe you give mortgages. But know that a bank like Chase is a huge and really exciting firm that has a lot of different areas that help customers, businesses, et cetera. So I want to let you know a couple of facts that I thought were pretty cool that I looked up about Chase. Number one, we were founded in 1799. We're headquartered here in New York City. Chase has over 5,000 branches itself. We have offices in over 100 countries, which I thought was pretty cool. And we employ over 250,000 people around the world. So if you're interested in banking in any capacity from what you hear today, know there's obviously a lot of opportunity. Secondly, again, we're not just a branch-based bank. There's different, sorry about that, technology. So there's 6 different lines of business: asset and wealth management, consumer and community bank, corporate functions, our commercial bank, corporate and investment, and technology. So that's a quick kind of broad brush of all the different parts of the bank. So let's talk about let's talk to some folks who are involved and have different roles here at the bank. So I'm going to go around really quickly, introduce them, and then we'll have a conversation. So folks, if you could just wave your hand when I mention you and your title. We're going to talk to Andrew Essick, who is an executive director in our Chase Commercial Term Lending Group. We're going to talk to Michael Kidd, who is a vice president in Chase Commercial Banking. We're going to talk to Nicole Stefanakos, who's an associate also in our Chase Commercial Banking Group. And then finally, Santi Wong, who's a vice president in the JPMorgan Private Bank. So on that note, let's get started. I'm going to start with Russian roulette. I'm going to start with Mike Kidd. So Mike, if you could unmute.
Morning.
Morning, Mike. So Mike, you are a vice president in the Chase Commercial Banking Group, right? I know you. And for your group, and I want to ask you a couple of questions. When I first got in banking, when I heard about Chase Commercial Banking, I thought to myself, wow, that's the group that if Apple or Google wants to bank somewhere and have a checking account, they're going to talk to Mike, right? But I know you're involved with a lot more than just that. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you do at the bank?
Yeah, so you brought up a good point before, and this is what I always tell people when they think about banking. You're right; they tend to think about either being a teller in a branch, or you think about the investment bankers doing the huge deal that will end up on the Journal every morning. So I'm again within the commercial bank and more specifically middle market, and what that means is that me and my team, we have a portfolio of companies that have top line revenue of about 20 million up to 500. So that's what's defined as middle market. So not quite your Apples and your Googles and your IBMs of that world. It's really what we consider the middle market. And what we do in the commercial bank is it is our job to face off with, or face off's not the right word, to interact with the owners, the CEOs, and the CFOs of these companies to be their primary operating bank. And then what I mean by operating bank is we help the companies just essentially manage their day-to-day operation and cash needs. And that's everything from your most basic products being a checking or a savings account to lines of credit, revolvers, acquisition financing, term debt. I wrote all these down so I don't forget them because we do so much. Commercial mortgages, asset-based lending, and then your additional products, foreign exchange, rate hedging, corporate card programs, 401k. So really everything a company in that space would need to move the cash around, make sure their business is running. And it's our job to be their partner and advisor to make that process as efficient and smooth as possible. And that's really what we do on a day-to-day basis.
That's very cool. So for you, Mike, besides having a great wardrobe, I just realized the same shirt. What does a day look like for you? So obviously pre-COVID, right? Because I get, know personally and professionally, we've all been working from home. You get into the office, you leave the office. What do you kind of do in that 8 hours or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I remember asking that. So before Chase, I worked at another bank and I was interviewing with the head of the Northeast at the time. And I asked that exact same question to her. And her answer was every day is different. And that's 100% true. So, I mean, to break it down, usually when you come in, just like most jobs, you've got a bunch of emails and phone calls, but you've always got in the background a couple of big deals you're working on, whether they're large loans or an acquisition or implementing some product. We use like a corporate card as an example that takes a little bit more time. So you've got your partners engaged, you've got the client engaged, you may have a meeting later in the day to catch up and go over next steps. But then what continually interrupts that is your other clients reaching out to you with, hey, this just popped. What do I do about this? And that could range anything from a real small, something super basic like, hey, I can't get into the system, in which case you get your service team involved, or hey, we just identified a target, want to run this by you, how much you think we could borrow, or something kind of in the middle where, well, actually COVID's a good example. A lot of clients prior to COVID are stuck on paper-based payments like checks. And also now that they're stuck at home, they're realizing, you know what, I don't have people in the office to sign these checks, to get the mail, to handle the physical paper. So now they're calling us and saying, hey, we know you guys have this great technology, and you've been speaking about it to me for a while, and I've kind of been ignoring you. But now that I'm stuck, I kind of see the value in that. And let's look into that, figuring out ways for their accounting systems to speak directly to the bank, taking out that human element, which makes it quicker and cheaper. So kind of a long-winded way of, again, saying every day is different. You always come in thinking you know what's going to happen because you got your little list. But then the first phone call or the first email comes in and your day goes a totally different direction. And I like it personally. You're always on your toes.
That's very cool. So for you, how did you, when you first got started in this business, why commercial banking? And then How did you get?
Yeah, I kind of fell backwards into it, if I'm being honest. So this may make some of the students online feel better. I don't have a degree in finance. I don't have a degree, my MBA, anything like that. I'm actually a psychology major with an econ concentration. At the time, I utilized my career center. I went to Binghamton University, so SUNY school. And like many students at that age, I was a little directionless, didn't know what to do. But they kind of saw where my strengths lay, were. I attended some of the career days, wound up speaking to some of the banks, and found out that they have programs, they're called credit training programs, that will essentially teach you the skills to become either an underwriter or, in my case, a banker. And fortunately, even though I was a little directionless, I pick up on things quickly and concepts quickly. So I got accepted to one of those programs. Wound up on the underwriting side for a little bit, and trying to keep this story sort of short. Through some time, wound my way into the banker role. So it was a fortunate series of events for me.
I love it. So then for you, I mean, one thing I know, and again, all of us on the line know one another professionally, right? Yep. So just kind of working with you, I know you've got a real passion for it. I think that's something that comes a lot when I think about it, right? When you work, and I'm assuming the same with your clients, why you're very successful here at the firm. What would you say is something you like the most about what you do day to day?
Yeah. So what I think I like the most is, again, taking a step back. My group covers companies that generate revenue of 20 million to 500. There's a really, really big difference between a $20 million company and a $500 million company. So at the lower end, let's call it 100 and below, these are oftentimes family businesses that become very successful and are getting to that next step. So what I really love about that is when you go to those offices, you're kind of speaking to maybe the first, second, or third generation ownership. Families intermingled. They're all passionate because this has been what has built up their family for years. They love their business. Are excited to give you a tour. I come in with ideas they may never have heard of, just because, again, they're growing, and I get to pretend I'm the smartest guy in the room, even if I'm not really, and present these ideas and concepts and products that help their business grow, and they love you for it. Then on the other end, when you're dealing with the larger companies, these oftentimes have a feel of a public company with a professional C-suite, people who usually know the product to some degree. And I'm not necessarily bringing new ideas, but I'm listening to what they're trying to do, making suggestions, and fine tuning things. So, to answer my questions, I love, my strength, again, because I don't pretend to be the smartest person in the room, is I like making friends. I like understanding how people work. And I like adding value and feeling like I'm a helpful part of the team. And with the market we serve, you get kind of a different flavor, to do that. So I really enjoy, just working with the people.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm gonna circle back later on. And I want to also, I'm a student. I have an interest based on what you said. I'd like to know more also about kind of what the culture is on your side of the aisle, and kind of what you work part of large teams, small teams, that kind of thing. But I'll make sure I come back to you on that, Mike. So I appreciate it. So I want to pivot now to Santi Wong. So Santi, I'm going to put you on the spot. So Santi, I had the pleasure of meeting about a year ago or so. We had a cup of coffee in Midtown, and not only is she maybe in a previous life an expert in all things JPMorgan Chase and every fact related to the company, right? But she's also an excellent banker. So Santi, you're a vice president in our private bank, right? And when I first came to banking again, with all these things people told me, like with Mike, someone said to me, the best way to think about the private bank is, all of us have to have a checking and savings account. But when Beyonce goes in to do banking, she doesn't necessarily walk into your local branch, right? She's got maybe a dedicated person who does work with her. Is that a good way to kick it off with you, or am I completely off base?
Somewhat a little bit off base, but I'll put some context and transparency around it. As you and probably everyone who's viewing this at some point, everyone has had a basic checking and savings account. And I always tell people that as you accumulate wealth and as your career goes on to a trajectory that you're unfamiliar with down the road, your needs and your sort of wealth management needs change over time. And so, yes, in the private bank, in my current role, we do bank. My job is to make friends and be helpful to all of the ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals. And right, a celebrity such as B would qualify, right? So when I think of private banking, you should think of people who have at least, call it, $5, $10, $25 million of deposits and investments. And in addition to a basic checking and savings or certificate of deposit, they have investment needs that are a little bit more complex, trust and estate planning, lending. Perhaps they're looking to start a private family foundation, a brand new business venture. And that's the time where a private banker like me would be introduced to the individual and their family. So the great part of my job is I get to work with individuals, people who are super high profile that you probably have seen on Facebook or any social media, and people you probably saw on TV or in a movie or in the news. So it's always been a pleasure.
No, that's great. And so for you, Santi, what about someone who, has an interest in what you just mentioned, right? So in being able to work directly with someone, help them to kind of build their wealth, on that side of the banking aisle, whereas Mike works more with companies, right? You are more specialized with the individual person. Are there any special licenses that someone in your field gets when they go into the private banking side? That kind of world?
Yeah. Yes. So in order to be a private banker, you do need to be licensed. The typical license that you would need would be a Series 7 license. That license allows you to speak to clients about investment products and services. Then the second license you need if you're in this, if you want to practice in the state of New York and predominantly in the tri-state area, you do need a Series 63. That gives you the credibility and the education around the state laws around securities and investments and different types of financial assets and what you can or cannot say to a client. And thirdly, I have a third license. This is a national license. It's my certified financial planner certification that I have, and it allows me to speak to clients about not only investments and economics, but also insurance, trust and estate, taxes, and retirement planning, all of which are important part of the dialogue. And the first two licenses, the Series 7 and 63, are required. The CFP is not mandatory, it is optional. And I chose to opt into it because if you're going to spend a career in helping individuals and their families around planning, investing, insurance, taxes, as well as retirement, I felt it was important to sort of round out my career and my education and my craft with those licenses.
No, I love that. I appreciate you sharing that. And Santi, so what about you personally in terms of how you got into this business? I think one of the things that's really unique about you, especially here at the firm, is while you're based here in New York, you've had an opportunity to work in other parts of the world, right? And I know you worked at JPMorgan Private Bank in Hong Kong as an example. So can you talk a little bit about, how you got into the business, how you got your start, and what was most exciting about working in different markets?
Yeah. So I've been with the firm for 11 years. I know it doesn't look like it from the Zoom screen, but trust me, I've been with the firm for 11 years. And in my 11 years with the firm, Paul, you're absolutely right. I've worn 3 different hats. One of them was a 2-year stint in Hong Kong for the private bank. And, over 11 years ago, I was a junior at Fordham University. And the way I got into JPMorgan was a huge recruiter on our campus. 2 to 4 times a year, they would show up at our career fair. And I made it a point when I went to my career fair to dress up and bring multiple copies of my resume and my business cards. And I made a list of, they would give you a map of all the companies in advance that would be attending. And I had a short list, a hit list of the banks that I wanted to be introduced to, or made it a point that I need to drop off my resume at certain institutions that I wanted to pursue an internship with. And JPMorgan was one of them. I then interned in their summer internship program where I worked in the chief investment office. I knew JPMorgan was the right firm, but probably not the right team. And so when I got my full-time offer, I started as an analyst in their corporate sector, in their investor relations team. And that's the team that is the middleman between JPMorgan's C-suite executives, or what we call the operating committee, and our institutional investors. I was there for 3 years, and then I told my manager when I got promoted to an associate that I was young, ambitious, and I wanted to have an international work opportunity because I was originally born in China. I speak Mandarin and Cantonese and my Fujian dialect fluently. And I said to my manager, I'm not married yet, and I don't have any kids. And if I were to do an international work opportunity, I would definitely want to do it in Asia, where my linguistic capabilities was my competitive advantage. and my corporate experience would give me a great foot in the door. And so my manager was my biggest advocate. She was my eyes and ears on the ground with internal opportunities. And she put me in front of another hiring manager in Hong Kong. And at that time, they were looking to hire a young associate to join their private bank to help them market investment products to their ultra high net worth and high net worth clients. And so I moved to Hong Kong in my mid-20s. I lived there for 2 years, and my job there was not a banker. I was on the trading desk. I sat on the trading desk for the private bank, and I would market hedge funds, private equity funds, and mutual funds to all of our Asian clients in Mandarin sometimes. And so that was my Asia experience. And then 6 years ago, I repatriated back to New York, and here I am, a banker covering clients here in New York who are founders and CEOs of middle market businesses.
That's great. That's super exciting. So Santi, just one last question for you. Similar to what I asked Mike, what would you say is the most exciting part of your job? And what do you love most about working in the private bank?
Yep. I think, and not to sound too cliche, but the best part of my job is going out there and meeting all the very successful business leaders, executives in our community. I think, if you poll all of your friends who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, very few can say that I've shook hands, I've had dinner with, I had lunch with, I met with, I had a long conversation with, put an X there, someone famous, someone super successful. And I think when you listen to everyone's personal story on how they became so successful, everyone has their own narrative. And I really enjoy hearing those narratives because, like a journalist, everyone, you report the stories, but every story is unique. And just hearing those stories is just amazing. It's very inspirational, at times aspirational for me.
That's great. No, that's super exciting. I appreciate that, Santi, very much. So I want to pull into the conversation a really good guy, Andrew Essick, who is an executive director / client manager in our what's called Chase Commercial Term Lending Group. When I think of this guy, he is a very, very important person, is a big part of the bank in terms of what he does. So, Andrew, when I think of you, especially living here in New York City, I look at your job as one that's very unique to a metropolitan area like New York City, because you do lending to investment properties, specifically apartment buildings, right? And not every market in the country has a large concentration of apartment buildings. So I'm in one now, and I'm assuming, if I were to boil it down, the person who owns my building, as an example, might come to you if they have a need to buy a building, invest in an investment property, something like that. So am I kind of along the lines of what you do day to day, or how would you kind of characterize your role with Chase?
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning. Our business it's technically called commercial term lending, but you described it well. We lend on investment real estate in the tri-state area, and we cover 13 markets across the country. When people think of a mortgage, many people think of it, hey, I want to buy a property and I'm going to use some of the bank's money and some of my money to kind of get to the closing table. The further thinking from that is also, a bank's providing liquidity and providing a client with the opportunity to grow their business. So if they're providing you funds to acquire an asset that you wouldn't be able to acquire if you didn't use leverage from the bank, or alternatively, if you are looking to recapture equity from a property that you already own through a refinance, so that you can then use that money to either reinvest in that building by renovating or doing some sort of improvement, or using that money to then buy another building and grow your portfolio. What we do in commercial term lending is we provide mortgages, but the reality of what we're doing is we're providing liquidity to owners of these assets so that they can then in turn either improve their property or grow their portfolio.
That's pretty cool. And so for you, we were talking before we got started on this call that you are, you spend a fair amount of your time in terms of your day-to-day work life, not in an office. And again,
Yeah.
obviously, I preface with pre-COVID, right? But can you talk to me a little bit about, for the person who says, I'm not really an office guy or gal, I'm interested in kind of what the traveling aspect or being out in the field aspect of a banker life could be. What is your life like there?
Yeah, so similar to what Mike said, as far as every day being different is incredibly true. My background is a little unique in that I came to the bank. I was on the investment sales brokerage side, so I was working for owners selling commercial real estate assets prior to joining the bank. That job as a broker, as an intermediary, is very blended as far as being in an office and being out of the office. Which I had the mindset of a bank is typically behind a screen, sitting in an office, kind of answering calls and creating kind of business that way. But our role is incredibly unique in that I'm in and out of the office, definitely pre-COVID, probably half and half. We're going to see the properties that our clients own. And it's exciting for us because these are many times our clients' most valuable assets. And so you can see the pride that they have when they show us their apartment building that they've just, renovated 2 units and gotten tenants in, and you can see the relationships that they have with their clients or customers that are actually their tenants. But it's one of the things I like the most about our job, in that, yes, I'm in the office and I have a team there and we're all working from computers, but it's kind of a blended approach as far as being in and out of the office for sure.
That's pretty cool. And so for you, is it fair to say that the bulk of you're kind of a deals guy, right? So the majority of your role at the firm is working in real estate. So you get pretty heavy in terms of people who are buying buildings, selling buildings, looking to refinance, going to closings, right? That type of thing.
Yeah, so it's 100% of it is running transactions, which are just by nature time sensitive and typically high pressure because there's stakes, right? So most of the times when you have a transaction in process, there's some sort of betterment for that owner or that buyer or that seller that will come out of the transaction. So it's high pressure, but it's also a situation where it's time sensitive. We have to move quickly so that our clients are in a better spot on day 7 than they were on day 1. And we move towards the closing table so that kind of everyone can meet their goals. But the core of the business is transactions. I would say, further than that, a lot of our kind of role and the way we position ourselves, and I think this sounds like it's true for everyone, and may not be, completely transparent for many of the students on the line, is that we try to position ourselves as advisors. So we offer clients market information. If we're involved in a transaction and a client wants to understand what that property is valued at, or what kind of rents they're achieving, or if there's a new development being constructed next door that's going to have some benefit to that immediate area. Part of our role as bankers is being in tune with the market that we're lending in. And so we're consistently telling our clients, look, call us first. We have long-term relationships. Yes, while we're running a transaction for you, that's an immediate need. But broader than that, we're having calls throughout the day just talking to clients about their goals in 2021 and 2022 and saying, here's what a lot of the market's thinking. What are you thinking? And are you on the same track? Are you contrarian? How can we help you, pivot and move towards one direction? So the broader thing than just being a banker is really getting kind of in the weeds with your clients and understanding their long-term goals, and then using the bank to help them, right? So we work with the private bank with clients that have high net worth needs, if they have a cash event, and then introducing them to someone in another area of the bank that can then help them. So a lot of what we do is try to serve as that advisory role and then execute on a transaction so that they can meet their immediate needs.
That makes sense. And so like I mentioned, I know that your group is super unique. And one of the things I thought was pretty cool that I looked up before we got on the call is that your group is the nation's #1 multifamily lender, which I kind of translate in my head to mean that you're obviously very busy and you guys are very customer centric and do a lot to help out, your clients. So how did you get involved with commercial term lending? And I think you've been with the group, you said, since 2014. You told me before the call.
Yeah, so my career started in 2009. I took an internship I graduated from Pace University with my undergrad, but during my senior year, I went to the Career Services Center. I wanted to work in real estate. I didn't know what area I wanted to be in. I was leaning towards commercial just because I felt like it was more numbers driven, and my background tends to be more finance. So I was partnered with an investment sales broker at a company at that time that I started in my senior year, working part-time. It was 2009, the market was terrible. So I started working part-time for free, unpaid, just to kind of get my foot in the door and learn what I could about the market. I did that through my senior year, graduated in 2010. The market hadn't improved yet. It was still very challenging. Came on full-time as a paid intern, and then worked my way through from an intern to an associate director, and then worked there until 2014. 2014, I was approached by a gentleman who was running our group just through LinkedIn. I think I had done a good job of kind of updating my LinkedIn profile so that it was showing my skill set and kind of revising and showing my resume. I was contacted by someone at JPMorgan Chase. They were a recruiter, because we have many recruiters. They said, would you be interested in coming in and having a cup of coffee with the head of our group? We're looking to expand in New York. At that time, we were the #1 multifamily lender in the United States, but in New York, we were usually top 5. And so we were looking to kind of expand in this space, in this market. And so I went and had a cup of coffee with him. I was not at that time interested in making a career change. It sounded incredibly appealing. The thing that's great about our role is it's very entrepreneurial, where you kind of manage your business, and yes, your day can be, depending on what your day is, being really reactive on clients' needs, but you also have your own personal touch on it. And I had never known that was a possibility. So we met a few people in the group, or I met a few people in the group, and then ultimately decided to join and make a career change. And so it's unique that I didn't apply for it. It was something that was found through LinkedIn. I think I should definitely hone on that for some of the students here. It's a powerful tool. Keeping that updated, keeping in tune with what's occurring in the market. Your network is really huge. You never know. One thing I wanted to say is, I'm in the business 11 years, but it's incredible. You meet someone next week that you met in 2010. It's a big world, but it's also small at the same time. And LinkedIn can be pretty powerful in keeping in tune with that.
I love that. No, thanks a lot, Andrew. That's really good stuff. That's really good stuff. And so last, but certainly not least, I'd like to bring in Nicole to the conversation. So Nicole, you are, your title is associate, right, in the Chase Commercial Bank. And I know that you and Mike Kidd both work in the same group, but I kind of want to hear from you. So from your perspective, what the difference is in your role and Mike's, and then if you could kind of kick us off that way, that'd be good to hear a little bit more from you.
So good morning, everyone. So like you said, my role and Mike's role are very similar. We work within the same group. The really big difference between Mike and I is Mike is a bit further along in his career than I am. I recently started with the bank about a year ago with no previous formal banking or education in finance. So when you start with the bank, you start at a certain level so that you can build your skill set. So I've been very fortunate that the group I got into has a very robust training program, from formal education to also being paired with bankers like Mike. So a big part of my job when I first started was working very closely with more senior bankers and really kind of acting like a shadow to them and just watching everything they did and understanding how they interacted with clients and how they fit their needs. And over time, as my education has been developed through formal training and time with bankers, it's sort of morphed into a hybrid model of supporting more senior bankers in more complex transactions while starting to build out my own portfolio and develop my own client relationships.
That's pretty cool. So for you, Nicole, what does a typical day look like? So obviously I know again, with COVID, we're all working from home, so definitely unique times, right? But, when you were going into the office, every day, what would it look like when you get into the office? What were some of the activities you did? Could you kind of walk us through what an average day was?
Yeah, so like everyone else said, every day truly is different, and it's one of the things I love about this job, especially pre-COVID. Certainly not chained to a desk in that sense. A typical day in the pre-COVID world, a lot of times started with some sort of networking event or education opportunity early in the morning, maybe an hour or two, somewhere nearby, different events or town events and things like that. Then it really morphs into handling any open issues with clients. Like Mike said, working on different complex transactions. Perhaps there's different write-ups that need to be done or different teams that need to be engaged. A big part of our role in the commercial bank is really interfacing with other parts of the bank so that our clients don't need to, and that we know where to go to achieve their goals, and making sure that the team is all working together and each part has what they need to move the job along, and coordinating between those groups. Another big part of the day could involve trying to generate new business for the bank, and that involves, physically going out, knocking on businesses' doors, talking to them about Chase services, and also going and visiting our clients and understanding what's going on in their business and making sure that we're providing the best solutions as possible for them.
That's pretty cool. So then for you, Nicole, and I know, you've talked about how, you had a little bit of a unique path to getting to your role here at the firm. Can you talk a little bit about your background and, how you started, how you got into banking, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So I have a completely non-traditional background, although I think a lot of us have a similar story on this call where maybe this isn't exactly what we set our sights on. So as a young student, I had a great fondness for psychology. I really wanted to be a professor with my own lab, my own line of research. I wanted to be a published author. I wanted grants from science foundations. And I pursued a PhD in neuropsychology. At the time, I was also working as an instructor at Queens College, CUNY, teaching psychology and statistic courses. And over the course of 2 years into my doctorate program, I started realizing that what I liked more was the actual running of a lab versus the real academic pieces. And slowly I started really realizing I wanted to be in a more fast-paced environment than academia can provide, or research can provide. And I also realized I liked management. I liked being at that high level. I liked doing the things in the lab that had to do with operations and kind of the things that other people pursuing my degree really hated. And I realized I may have made a mistake with my education. So I decided to take a leave of absence and try my hand in the business world. I was lucky to land a role at a large national corporation where I worked hand in hand with the CEO of that company. It's a middle market size company, a company that we support in my line of business at JPMorgan. And through that role, and the company was very complex with many entities, the CEO really gave me wide berth and allowed me to develop and learn through his companies. And he gave me increasingly more responsibility, handling mergers and acquisitions, divestitures, working on the books of various businesses, and getting deep into the accounting with our various professional organizations that we worked with, such as our accountants and our attorneys. After about 5 years in that role, I had developed very strong relationships with the banks because a big part of my role involved talking to the bank about things our business needed. And I started realizing that I had kind of hit my growth potential in that role, and I was looking for something more. So I started reaching out to some connections I had made. One connection in particular, Rebecca O'Connell, who runs the middle market group for the Long Island Queens commercial bank. I reached out to her thinking that she would be a good contact to put me in connection with her, the CEOs she knew and CFOs she knew from her role. And me and her had a breakfast and we talked a lot about banking and what a day looked like in the life of a banker. And we realized that that might be a good career path for me. And it happened to work out that she had this associate role available that worked with my education and my skill set. And within a month, I was at the bank and I love it.
Oh, I love that. It goes to show that reinventing yourself and focusing on something you have a passion for definitely can pay off. So I appreciate that a lot. It makes a lot of sense. So Nicole, last question for you. And again, knowing you, one thing about you, and we've been on many Zoom calls together, you definitely, like everyone else on this line, one thing I really appreciate about you is that you really have a passion and really a good laser focus on the job. So as an example, when I think about you, one of the things that really comes to mind is, we've been on calls where we'll start to go off on tangents and you're really good at bringing everyone back in and to staying on agenda. So that's something that I don't think I ever said thank you, but thank you.
I appreciate that.
But so for you, my last question is, what would you say, especially since you started going down a path that wasn't for you and you made the pivot to banking, what's most exciting about the role now that you like most?
What I love about my role is truly that every day is different and I deal with such a variety of companies. I find it fascinating to listen to CEOs and CFOs talk about their business, how they're going to be successful, how they plan for the future, how they plan to take care of their employees, every aspect of it. And what's so cool about being in the commercial bank is that I'm not in one industry or one specialization. I one day can be sitting at a company that manufactures musical instruments, and the next day a company that sells chemicals to make cosmetic products. So it's really cool to learn all about those different businesses. And I would say, a big part that makes me successful in this role is very similar to things throughout my entire life and career. And it's building relationships, taking the time to listen, and also staying in an education mode. So really, taking that time to listen to what the other person's talking about, whether it's in a classroom or a meeting setting, and dig deeper, really learn through the process, and then see how you can add value.
No, that's great. I appreciate that a lot, Nicole. So I appreciate everything you guys said. It's 11:43, so I want to just kind of set an agenda for the rest of the call for everyone to make sure that, again, this is super productive. I want to remind everyone, like Neil mentioned, that you can utilize the question and answer section. I see a couple of questions have come in. So if you do have a question, please feel free to type it in and we'll definitely, hopefully time permitting, be able to answer those. And then also, I did promise that I had information about where to find further resources if JPMorgan Chase were of interest to you. And I think this is a pretty analogous process if you're interested in other banks, because I have to make a plug that we're obviously not the only bank out there, but we all happen to work here at Chase. So I'll kick off the questions this way, and I'll kind of throw this maybe to maybe two people, that way we can answer some other questions. So maybe I'll throw this question to let's say Andrew and Santi. So for you two, what would you say is something, when you look back, knowing what you know now, for the person who's in school, who's maybe looking to get started, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in getting started in the industry and may be interested in going into one of your two channels? Any good advice to share?
Sure. Santi, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Look, I would say a few things, and for those of you who are taking notes, I like to sort of just enumerate them simply for you. Number one, when you're looking for a job straight out of college, I'll tell you, it's probably not going to be your dream job. But what I'll tell you is, when you are applying, make sure that you do your due diligence and your research, and you figure out, if I'm going to pursue a career in this, why this firm? Be able to answer the question, why this particular firm? And also within this particular firm, why this particular group or team. And the other thing, well, you should think about is be very thoughtful and cerebral and really think long and hard about the longevity in the career. Because if you're just taking on a role or a job because of the compensation, because you're jumping on the bandwagon because your friends are telling you to do it, or it's the buzzword at your college campus and your dean or your professor tells you that you should do it, you should formulate your own opinion as to why you're pursuing a career specifically within this industry, why in this firm, and why specifically within this firm, this specific team. So it will require you to do some soul searching, but I always tell people, start with why and work backwards.
That's great.
I think that's a really good point. I would just add being at JPMorgan for the past few years, students will contact me on LinkedIn and just ask to have a cup of coffee or have a call. And it's a way for students to ask those questions. So to Santi's point, when you're looking for your entry level role, you should be thinking about it in a way that is what's your growth going to be within that role, not just take a job because it pays, better than the other one. And thinking about when you speak to the individuals that are participating in that business line, can you see yourself amongst that division, right? So I always tell people, look at the ranks of individuals in that group. Do they have what you would like to have? If it's work-life balance, and they don't have that, then maybe that role is not the right area. If it's a engaging job that is highly dependent on you learning every day, then make sure that that's the culture of where you're going into. So you have to take a role in it and be proactive about it. And then the other thing I would just mention, once you are in the bank or you do get a job, what I've found is that a lot of ways or a good way to get exposure to management within a division is generally through things that aren't necessarily related to your specific job role. So you can volunteer for certain groups or tasks or goals that the business is thinking about on a broader base. And by doing that, you're exposing yourself to potentially the management team that may not have direct exposure with you unless you volunteer yourself. So once you are somewhere, especially a big bank like JPMorgan or a lot of other institutions, in a weird way, some of your exposure and your productiveness may come from things that are not necessarily on your job description. And so I think that's an important thing to just describe.
Yeah, I love that. One of the questions, and I think this is a good one maybe for Nicole and Mike, one of the questions is related to job training. And, one of the things I guess I'll throw out to you guys is, you mentioned that you do a lot of work with clients and you've some large, some smaller. Chase doesn't just throw you into the deep end and say, good luck, right? There's, you guys work and there's some good trainings and a process and different ladders you can kind of climb as you get better and better in your role. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I have an answer, but Nicole, do you want to go first? It's a little more recent for you, I think.
Yeah, so I've actually been blown away with the level of training that the bank provides. While it is true you need some education, obviously, to get your foot in the door, they certainly are there to support you and provide you with ample resources. One of the things to me that's so cool about our training is that many of the leaders of the trainings are people who have worked in the roles and have 20, 30 years experience with the firm, and there's really a lot to learn from them. The one thing I will say about the training programs too is that you get from them what you put into them. So, and that's kind of also what I was talking about with, keeping that student side engaged and always kind of approaching things very seriously in an academic perspective, because it is a very complex industry and there's a lot to learn. And so you need to take it seriously and be very engaged with training.
Yep, and Nicole hit it nail on the head. So instead of adding more, I'll just kind of use myself as an example. So I think I touched upon this earlier. But when I came out of college, this was a few years back, where I worked for another very large international bank, but I was accepted to their literally called the credit training program. And I bring this up because Chase has the exact same thing, even though this was at a different institution. But it was a year-long credit training program where they took what you learn in college, whether you had a finance degree or something different like myself, and taught you the particular skills that were specific to, in our case, the commercial bank. So you'd spend a year there. And then it's not always about the formal training. It's about the job progression, because even when you're done with the formal training, so like I said, I spent a year there. I actually even got sent to England for a little while for some additional training, which was just an incredible experience, but a story for another day. But when you get out, even when your formal training is done, the progression of the career is always ensuring that you're learning. So you start, I think my first title was analyst. So I was given tasks that I could handle at the time, but always paired up with someone more senior. So while I'm doing my day-to-day work, it's being reviewed by more senior people. They're giving advice, they're teaching, and then you step up to, I think it was assistant vice president was my next title. But again, a little more responsibility, a little more exposure to more complex deals, still dealing with more senior people. So you can't, they'll let you find your way, but push you back in if you start to go off the rails a little bit, and always just using it as opportunities to develop your skills. And then I guess there's one other thing I'll add to Nicole's point about you get in what you get out of it, what you put into it. And this also answers the question that Paul answered earlier, is never, ever, ever be afraid to reach out to more senior people, whether they're on your team, a different team, even if they're very senior. Almost everyone at Chase, and I'm sure at other institutions, will be more than happy to sit down with you for 15 or 30 minutes, get a cup of coffee, get a beer, get some breakfast, something, and pick their brain. Because some of the best advice I was ever given was take a moment to look around and see who's successful. Pick a couple of people out that have risen very quickly and get some time on the calendar and say, hey, what did you do? How did you get where you are? I see you're kicking butt. Give me some tips and advice. And that's all part of your I guess, the non-formal training you can get through Chase or any other, large institution. That's just a great piece of advice I was given not too long ago. And to this day, I still schedule, whenever I can, 30-minute sessions with very senior people, if they'll let me, just to pick their brain and then, find out what drives them and what helped them, succeed.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's amazing. I really appreciate, guys. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. So I have 11:52. I think it's a good place for us to kind of move into the end of the program before I kick back to Neil in the chamber. So just two quick things. One is I just want to acknowledge there were a couple of questions which I want to just quickly touch on. Someone asked how easy or hard it is to move from accounting to finance. And I think you guys, did a phenomenal job of touching on this. I think that, your degree can be applicable to different lines of business. And I think that if you do have an accounting focus and or a finance focus, you can still leverage that to go into different parts of the bank, right? Depending on what you have an interest in. Another question was related to how technology has affected the customer relations portion of banking. And I think that the proof's in the pudding in terms of just the fact that we're on this virtual call, which is a big part of our kind of day-to-day and how we're interacting with clients. We do a lot more of that virtually through Zoom, whereas traditionally we would meet them in person, shake their hands, meet them at their offices, et cetera. I want to kind of just finish this up, by saying thank you to everyone. Andrew, Nicole, Mike, Santi. I appreciate you guys taking a few minutes out of your day to be able to do this. I hope everyone on the line found it to be incredibly productive and incredibly informative. I did promise you a resource. If you're on the line, you have a paper and pen, I'd like you to write down the following website, which I think is a really good next step in terms of learning more about banking and specifically JPMorgan Chase. Careers.jpmorgan.com. Again, careers.jpmorgan.com. That is our portal for all things related to internships specifically that are available. I know that's a question that people have had as well. How do I intern at JPMorgan Chase? That'll give you some really good, robust information about it, how to apply, what's involved. But then also, if you're at the point in your career where you're looking for a job opportunity, Chase also and JPMorgan posts everything on that platform. So incredibly important, careers.jpmorgan.com. Other than that, again, I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for participating. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for having us. And Neil, I'll kick it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. And I want to thank everybody else for joining us today on the Banking QCIC seminar. We'll have more opportunities like this in the coming weeks where we bring more subject matter experts in to connect with students across the borough. Next week, we have one on law with Margaret Lang, who's one of our co-chairs of our Banking and Law Committee. So we're really excited about that. But yeah, thanks again to everybody for joining us. And again, special thanks to our panelists. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.